In this Lords of the Fallen video, I'm going to be talking about my hands-on gameplay impressions of Lords of the Fallen. I got to play this game a little over a month ago when I was at Twitchcon Paris. CI Games graciously came over and showed me the game. I got to play with them and ask a lot of questions. I've been dying to talk about this game for over a month, so I can't wait to discuss this game with you guys. So there are two things I think you'll notice immediately when looking at the gameplay of Lords of the Fallen, and the first is the distinct art style of the game. It's much darker than the original game. It has more of a dark fantasy tone to it, and it kind of reminds me of something like Dark Souls meets Diablo in terms of the brutality, the gruesomeness of the creatures and environments that you're in. It's very, very dark, it's very, very grim, and things seem like they are going very horribly wrong for the world that you're in. And it's not that the original game didn't have a good art style or a good art direction, because it did, but I feel like the direction that they've gone with the new title is closer to something that I think Souls fans will really, really enjoy, and I personally enjoy it a little bit better myself. And the next thing you're obviously going to notice is the visuals of this game. They are stunning to look at. When you look at the game, it looks gorgeous, it looks beautiful. The detail on the environments, they have all this subtle detail. You can see things in the background clearly. It's not like blurred out, stuff like that. The character models are very, very detailed. There is just so much detail into the visuals of this game. You can't help but kind of drop your jaw a little bit when you look at it and you're like, wow, this is absolutely incredible for an action role-playing game. In fact, the game is so stunning to look at, one can't help but wonder, is this game going to have performance issues on PC? Is it going to have performance issues on console? We've seen a lot of titles recently that were gorgeous to look at, but they just had a lot of technical problems in terms of performance. And you look at this game and you go, is it going to have those issues too? Now, I only got to play a couple hours of the game near the beginning, and I didn't experience technical or performance issues during that time, but it still makes me wonder, because this is just a small slice of the game that I've seen, and I could see how this might be a concern given the things we've seen in the gaming industry recently. However, if they can manage to pull this off without technical issues on launch, I think Lords of the Fallen will probably be the best looking ARPG to date. Talking more about the gameplay, you'll notice here that there are a lot more similarities to Souls than the previous game as well, from the way combat is designed, block parrying and dodging, to the way the character moves, to the world design of the game, how it's kind of interconnected and there are shortcuts, the fact that there are stats on equipment that resemble that of a Souls game. You know, equipment now has like lore notes on it. Everything feels like it's straight out of a Souls game, and when you look at it, you're going to see the similarities and comparisons almost immediately. And frankly, I actually feel like this was intentional. I feel like the developers took feedback from the first game and went, you know what, let's do this in a way that the Souls audience will really appreciate. And so I think they've designed their game intentionally for the Souls community to play, and they're going like, hey guys, we can make a really good game here that's something that you really, really want to play, and we're going to do that just for you. And that's kind of what this game feels like so far. The combat itself feels really good in my opinion. It's very responsive, and it's probably some of the closest you'll have to the Souls games themselves, but it's not as good as Souls. Like, you'll feel the difference immediately when you start playing, but it's not like so glaring that you're like, ugh. It's just not quite as good. I mean, From Software has combat down to a T, and everyone else is still trying to catch up, and Lords of the Fallen is as well. But they did a pretty good job in my opinion. But something that's really caught my attention from seeing some of the gameplay that was sent over, and this is not something that I got to see in my game time because I didn't get far enough to unlock it, is the magic of the game. The magic looks absolutely outstanding, from not only from a visual standpoint, but also from a mechanic standpoint. It seems very creative, it seems very interesting. And if I had one gripe about the Elden Ring and Souls games, it's just that the magic isn't as creative. It feels like it's just been using the same spells now for like 4 games mostly. And I'm excited to use magic that, you know, might be a little bit different, that's not quite the same as it's always been in one of these types of games, and to see how it interacts with the game world. I did get to fight one boss in my time playing the game, and I will say that there is an NPC summoning system, just like the Souls games and Elden Ring, where you can summon an NPC from the game world to assist you in boss fights. And I will say I really enjoyed the boss fight. It was fun, the mechanics were interesting, the effects, the visual effects of the boss themselves were fantastic, the music was good. So I feel like the boss fights in Lords of the Fallen are going to be more memorable than previous Souls-like games. If you look at games like Mortal Shell, if you look at games like The Surge, and even the old Lords of the Fallen game, I don't think the boss fights in those games were particularly well designed or memorable in a lot of cases. And I think it's something that 3D Souls-likes could really work on. You look at something like Hollow Knight or some of these other 2D side-scrollers like Blasphemous, their boss fights are phenomenal for a Souls-like 2D game. But the 3D Souls-like games, in my opinion, have really struggled with phenomenal boss fights, and I think Lords of the Fallen has a really good chance of changing that. Talking a little bit about the different realm mechanics, right? Because this is something that's unique to Lords of the Fallen, where you are not only moving through the game world in the land of the living, but you also move through in the land of the dead. And it's an interesting concept, in my opinion, because, you pull out your lantern and you see things that you can't see. And when you're watching the gameplay, it's really, really impressive to see how they have like a world layered on a world, and the way it's designed is actually extremely creative, because they had to think in different dimensions at the same time when they were designing their game world, which has got to be extremely difficult to do. And I did have several interactions with this mechanic in the time that I played, where I had to pull up my lantern to reveal a pathway that was not there otherwise. Like one time I had to go underwater. Like there was just like a little pond and there was nowhere for my character to go. And I was like, where do I go? And I pull up the lantern and all of a sudden the water disappears and there's steps going downward, which was very cool from an exploration point of view. And you'll use this off and on as you traverse the game world. But I didn't get enough time to really get a sense of how much does it impact the overall gameplay loop of the game. I can give you one example that was really interesting though. Like I was fighting an enemy and he was completely immortal and I was like, why can't I kill this guy? And then I pulled out my lantern to reveal that there was a guy from the Umbral Realm that was actually buffing him, and I couldn't kill this guy until I killed the guy in the Umbral Realm. So I had to somehow get around the guy while holding my lantern up and attack this other guy and kill him and then fight the guy. And it seems really interesting when you say that. You're like, wow, that's really cool. But also, it was kind of unwieldy. My character didn't move very well while the lantern was out. There's a bit of delay from the time you press the lantern button to it actually comes out. So you couldn't, roll through the guy's attack and then pull the lantern out really quick and attack. It didn't work that fast. And I wonder, is it more of a gimmicky mechanic, or is it actually going to be something that sets this game apart from other RPGs in this genre? And I just don't know the answer to that yet. But the Umbral Realm itself is absolutely interesting. When you're inside of it, it feels darker, it feels colder, you feel more alone, things are more punishing, it's harder challenge-wise. The game itself, Lords of the Fallen, I would say is, on par with Souls games in terms of difficulty with what you're playing, or at least close to it. But then you go into the Umbral Realm, and man, it is no joke in there. And I think it's really interesting because players have a lot of control about when they can go into the Umbral Realm and back. So if you wanted to up the challenge of the game, for instance, you could actually play more in the Umbral Realm and less in the regular realm. So I think the fact that you have a lot of control over that will make the game a little bit more interesting in itself. But something that just keeps blowing my mind that I absolutely cannot wrap my head around is that Lords of the Fallen is supposed to be 5 times longer than the original game. The original game, if I remember correctly, was somewhere between 15 to 20 hours for a playthrough. That means this game could be 50 to 100 hours, somewhere in that range, depending on how good of a player you are, how much you explore, whether you co-op or PvP, etc. I mean, when you look at how incredible the game looks and the gameplay looks, 50 plus hours just seems, wow. I mean, we're talking about the size of a Souls game here, maybe bigger than a Souls game. Not quite Elden Ring levels, obviously, but you could probably compare it to one of the games in the Dark Souls franchise. You're talking about that size, or maybe even a little bit larger than that. That's absolutely unheard of. How many Souls-like games have come out that have been anywhere near the size of a Souls game, or even bigger? I can't think of one. So this could be the first one that's on par with Souls in terms of the scope of the game. And as I mentioned, the game has co-op and PvP. I mean, these are things that were not present in the original game. How many Souls-like games have co-op and PvP? How many? Yeah, it's a very small list, to say the least. And I think this is something that was added specifically for the Souls community. I think, CI Games went hey, we know what Souls players like. Let's give it to them. So let's figure out a way to implement co-op and PvP. So they did that in this game, and I cannot wait to play co-op through this game. I probably won't do a ton of PvP, but this is a great game to co-op. It has that dark atmosphere where it's lonely and you want to have a friend with you, and you can play with randoms or you can play with your friends. So I assume there's going to be a password matching or something like that, since they mentioned you could specifically play with your friends. So that's fantastic too. You have either option. Having said those things, I am looking forward to Lords of the Fallen more now than I ever have before. Seeing the new gameplay, adding that on top of my gameplay experience, which I really enjoyed, thinking about playing co-op with Vex, all this gets me really, really excited for Lords of the Fallen in the fall, and I can't wait to play. And I would just say to those players out there that were not happy with the original title, either because they didn't like the combat, or there was some issue with the game, they felt like it was too heavy, or there wasn't enough customization, they didn't like playing Harkin, they wanted to make their own character. There is character creation in this game. I think you're going to find probably what you were looking for in that game in this new rendition of Lords of the Fallen. I mean, what a year for gaming, right? We've got Remnant 2, we've got Baldur's Gate 3, Starfield's around the horizon, we've had Final Fantasy 16, we had Breath of the Wild 2, we've had so many other games I'm forgetting, Hogwarts Legacy. It's been absolutely bonkers for a year for action and action role-playing titles. And I think this one should be on your list. If you don't have it on your list as something to be excited for, put it on there because the game looks absolutely incredible and I cannot wait to see more from it. What do you guys think after seeing the gameplay? Are you more hyped now? I know you are. You absolutely are. Are you worried about performance though? Is that a consideration? Let me know in the comments below.